Hello, I'm Mike Alkin, and this is my video for cognitive delays. Let's first start off with the definition of cognition, which the textbook defines cognition as the mental action or process of acquiring knowledge through thought, experiences, and the senses. Another way that the textbook describes cognition, which I think is easier to understand, is that it's basically how the individual makes sense of his or her own world. So some children with cognitive delays might learn at a slower pace because they might be processing some of the information a little bit slower. So that this way they could probably benefit from repeated instructions and just giving the instructions at a slower pace. Another characteristic of children with cognitive delays is that they might experience short-term memory deficits, and they may have difficulty attending to relevant stimuli. They may also develop slowly in language. So some of these adaptations to some of the lessons that were given to us. The first lesson I chose was the critter lesson, and one adaptation that I can make to this lesson is when they're actually making the critter. They're told to have a big circle and little circles and use the big circle as the body and the little circles as more of like eyes. So one thing that you can do is just guiding them through step by step, making sure that they know that the bigger circle is for the body and that the smaller circle is for the eyes, so you can actually point to the bigger circle when asking which circle do you use for the body. You actually point and guide their hand towards the bigger circle. Another adaptation that I would make to this is the pipe cleaner. They want to use a pipe cleaner to show that it's a square and not a circle. One of the things that the book mentions is to use things that are more familiar to them. So you can actually, the next activity is using crackers. So you can actually use the cracker, which is shaped as a square, and have them bite off the corners of the cracker to notice that, because the whole purpose of the activity is to show that circles do not have corners and squares do have corners. So you can bite off the corners of the crackers to make the same distinction. And then the last part is when they are mixing and matching the square and circle crackers. You can just have them repeat this activity a couple more times because, like I said earlier, the book believes that repetition can help in the learning process for children with cognitive delays. So there's just two adaptations for those. The second lesson that I chose was the dyeing rice, pasta, or salt lesson. And for this lesson, I'm not sure if it applies, but it says that it would be done at home. So if it is to be done at home and there is no teacher there, you should definitely be breaking the steps down more. One of the suggestions that the book mentions is make sure that the steps are broken down one by one, and to maybe even have them complete the first step before moving on to the next step. So for instance, it says to pour the rice into the Ziploc bag. You can have the directions make it even break it down even further, having maybe say grab the rice, step number 1, and step number 2, grab the Ziploc bag, step number 3, open the Ziploc bag, step number 4, pour the rice into the Ziploc bag, just to make it easier for them to understand the directions and to do it correctly. And if it is done in class, then obviously the teacher can guide them through that also by pointing to the materials that they're actually going to need. The third lesson that I chose was the magnet lesson. One thing I would do with this is to have them work in partners. I believe the lesson does have them working with partners. And I would try to have the partner of the child with a cognitive delay go first so that they can have an example of what they are to do. Even prior to that, when it says that the teacher will explain what is magnetic and what is not magnetic, they can even actually perform the action while they're explaining it. So they take a magnet and take the magnetic material and actually put it to it, and while they're explaining it. And as I mentioned, allow the partner to go first. And then also I think repetition, as I stated earlier, the textbook believes that repetition can be positive for children with cognitive delays, so allowing for multiple opportunities to experiment with what is magnetic and what is not magnetic, I believe will help them. And another thing, I would also choose to try to bring in more familiar materials that the students are familiar with, such as bringing in coins or keys or something that the students probably have seen before, right? And the fourth lesson that I chose was the box ball lesson, where they have to throw the ball into boxes and then either add, subtract, or multiply the two numbers that they get. Once again, I would not have the student go first so that they can see what other students are doing. And then once again, I would break down those steps. I would physically have them go through step by step, have them grab the ball first, then step up to the line, then throw the ball, and have the teacher guide them as they're going through it. And since one of the characteristics could be short-term memory deficits, they could possibly not remember the numbers that they get after throwing the ball in the boxes. So I would have, if I were the teacher, I would try to make sure that they know the two numbers that they get. So if they get 2 and 3, just make sure what is 2. Well, also you need to know that depending on in the lesson it says depending on the ability of the student, they can either subtract, add, or multiply. So I would try to have the student add or subtract, and they can have, so what is 2 plus 3, for instance, so to make sure that they remember the numbers that they received after throwing the ball into them. Just repeat the numbers, and so looking forward to the feedback that I get from the video, and thank you very much. Have a good night.